All righty. Hello, everyone. We are thrilled to have you all. We are going to be talking about speaking to contractors about CMMC. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you don't know who we are, my name is Kaleigh Floyd. I am the Business Development Director here at Axiom. I also have with me today Bobby Guerra. He is the CEO of Axiom. Let's get started, shall we? I am so excited. For those of you guys who don't know, we already said this already, but we are CMMC Level 2 certified. We got CMMC Level 2 certified at the beginning of this year in January when it opened up. If anybody says they were CMMC Level 2 certified before then, they are what, Bobby? Liars. Because it wasn't real. It wasn't open yet. So yes, there's a good way to tell if somebody is lying or not, huh? We do help desk support as well. So we're just a regular, MSP that provides help desk, IT support, backup, security, for our clients. We've been doing this since 2002. Before CMMC was a thing, we were just doing MSP support. So that's our bread and butter. But then this thing, CMMC, decided to come up and Bobby was like, listen, this is going to be a big deal, and there's going to be a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are going to need to implement this, and they're not going to know what to do. And probably many MSPs are not going to know about it. So let's try to figure it out and figure out what's going on, and try to not only help contractors, but also the MSP community prepare for this craziness that is going to be up ahead.
Not just that, but also kind of create if you go back and watch videos of our podcasts, which we have, it's good how they suggested, you might look at it and go, well, I think they were saying things a little differently than they said in season 1. And that's because we're all learning this as we're going along. And so we've tried to create an outlet for us to share, moment to moment as we're starting to see and understand how things are happening, just provide insights of what we're seeing. So it's not like, you have, once we share this information, it's like in stone and you don't have to worry about it. If you have any questions, just put it in the Q&A section.
Yeah.
In the tab up top.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, so true. And then I do want to highlight one thing, guys. Our tactical pants, we did put those at the top. That is a big part of our outfit. If you're wondering, I'm surprised Bobby might even be wearing them right now. He wears them around the house, which is so odd to me. But yes. We all wear our tactical pants because I think it is important to note that we are an MSP first and foremost, and we like to carry a lot of stuff in our pockets, whether that is USBs or cables or whatnot. You can check more about us on our website too. But enough about us, and let us talk about CMMC, shall we? Okay. Here's something to note. If you are an MSP and you're new to this, which we talked about this briefly in our previous webinar, this is not all going to be the same stuff from our previous webinar, but this stuff is important to note no matter what's happening. So DFARS clause 252.204-7012 is for safeguarding CUI. And many contractors that you probably have that are thinking that they're going to need CMMC Level 2 compliance or a CMMC Level 2 certification is probably looking at this and realizing that their environment needs to be CUI, like safeguarding CUI. And so why is this important? Well, the DoD expected them to have this done by December 31st of 2017. Okay, so this is very, very important to note. If some of your, contractors that you're talking to are saying, when is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect me? Well, a lot of them probably don't realize that they're already attesting to NIST 800-171 right now in many of their contracts. So please make sure to do your research on NIST 800-171 and the requirements that are for that, because many of the people that you're probably servicing right now, if they believe that they are going to need CMMC Level 2 compliance and be CMMC Level 2 certified, are already attesting to this. So it is so, so critical to see what you are getting yourself into, okay? Specifically, what you're getting yourself into is 110 controls, 320 assessment objectives, for NIST 800 171, I'm adding the assessment objectives 171A because it is critical to get down to the nitty-gritty of each assessment objective and not just the controls themselves. Guys, if you are an MSP listening to this, there are a lot of the assessment objectives that are done just regularly by an MSP. You know what I mean? With that, without even realizing that CMMC is involved in any way, you are actually involved in their system that is complying to this standard. And an example of that, Bobby, which you like to share all the time, right, is like access control, even like adding a user. When you are adding a user and their privileges into the system that is going to be involved in CUI or having CUI in the system, you are actually doing 2 or 3 of the assessment objectives right off the bat. And actually probably a little bit more, but
but it's more than just that, right? You've got to look at all 320 assessment objectives, and as an MSP, think about how you're going to support your clients and the things that you technically can't support and how that's all going to work as a unit.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people, I've been an MSP like for a long time, and kind of the approach is, if you go at it like you do with CIS, for example, you'd be like, well, we're just going to write out how we do things for CIS individually, and this is how we're going to do it, and that's fine, right? No, you're not going to, you're going to fail doing that approach with CMMC because you've got to look at it as a system.
Right.
An information system that is a holistic system that is going to be assessed, because that's what's going to happen. They're going to assess it, and you've got to look at it from the perspective of how you as an MSP are going to provide those services to the client, and then how you're going to make sure all 320 are met. And it may not be your responsibility, but you better darn well know how the client's going to do it under your guise. Right?
So true.
So maybe it's media protection. Well, I'm not there. I'm not holding their media. They are. Okay, that's fine. But you've got to provide guidance and ideas about how they can do that and how you can come alongside if at all possible. So you've got to account for all 320 of those as you're working with the client. You can't just say I'm focused purely on my toys and the rest is really the client's responsibility. Now, I've seen plenty of MSPs try that approach to work with clients and help march them down the path of CMMC compliance. They're just marching them off a cliff. Just because the reality is clients just don't know this very well. And if you don't have at least a comprehensive approach for this, even if it's not really your responsibility, you're just going to be part of the problem for them ultimately.
Yeah.
And then it's more of about pointing fingers and who's responsible for what. And maybe it's clearly defined, it's their responsibility in your matrix, and you're 100% right and they 100% failed. Great. I mean, I'm sure they appreciate that. I mean, it's just, you really got to think about this. It's not like anything engagement wise as a managed service provider you've ever done. It's just, it is very different from that approach.
And so this is why we're talking about this first, and kind of, we did discuss this a little bit in our previous webinar, but if you do not know this information, to have a conversation that is going to be productive about CMMC with your contractors that you are working with is frankly, in my opinion, going to be impossible. Like there's no way that you're going to be able to many contractors that I've talked to also, I've talked to them and they didn't even realize what the difference was between CMMC level 1 and self-assessing versus when you go to CMMC level 2 and you need a certification, that is not done by you. It is done by a C3PAO. They did not even know that there was an outside organization that was going to be assessing them. I'm not joking. So you really you got to do some of this backup research. Even if it's just looking at NIST 800 171 and 171A, looking at the assessment objective level, and looking at 32 CFR final rule that was published and released and finalized on December 16th of last year, you really got to look at this stuff. No joke. Especially, too, if you're in this chat and you are a prime contractor that has subs under you, you are responsible for your subcontractors, okay? And many of them I'm telling you right now, are waiting for the last possible minute of you to force something on them to do anything. So I've talked to many of them and they're like, well, my prime hasn't said anything, so I'm good. I was like, I think you should ask just to make sure. I think you should clarify, like, let's make sure what we're doing here. They're like, well, they haven't said anything to me, so I'm not going to say anything to them. No, it's an interesting approach, right? But the primes are responsible for their subs. So please make sure to also know this information to be able to relay it to the subcontractors that are not paying attention. Okay. Before we get into the specifics of what to talk about with contractors, let us talk about transparency and let's clearly define this, right, Bobby?
Yeah, I'd like to this is a situation where we could talk more specifically about, like, I think trying to be transparent with a client, understanding, who you are and what you're offering. Yes. Mm-hmm. So a little bit more about us. I think someone asked, Tom, more about who we are and like what types of services we provide. So we're a managed service provider from the perspective of we're a big IT hug for the client. My Outlook doesn't open. I can't seem to print this. I need to add a new user. Help me add some licenses in my 365. Hey, we can't get to the internet. What's going on? I mean, we're a full help desk support system for our clients. But if we want to do CMMC for a client, we had to sit down and think to ourselves, okay, how do we get them from zero to hero, from not compliant to compliant?
I just watched that movie. Just watched it.
Zero to hero?
Yeah, I watch Hercules.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's in that song. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Give it some credit because you just quoted it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. So it's a big deal about trying to know how you're going to provide the services. And for us, like, we couldn't just come in and be a help desk and full support for someone that's already compliant. Chances are that's going to be a small percentage. Most of them are going to come to us and go, we have nothing. How do you get us to where we go? My favorite is when the clients come in and they're like, we're pretty good. We're pretty close. Like, how much is it going to be for you to just kind of like pop us in the driveway? We're like in the neighborhood, just drive us the rest of the way in and put us in the driveway. We're good, right? And you're like, so you have a system security plan? No. And you're like, okay. And they're like, so what policies do you have? Well, we've got some things over here. We just got a good system. We're in GCC High. You're like, yeah, okay. That doesn't mean you've got a system that's compliant. Mm-hmm. So you've got to really think about that. And so what we did is we thought about how we're going to approach this. And this is something that I feel really passionate about for organizations. Like, in the old days, like, consulting companies would be like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do like a gap assessment and we're going to tell you where your differences are. And we're going to create this POAM and we're going to walk you through getting in alignment and everything's going to be good. And that makes sense for a consulting company, right? Because the consulting company is going to come in and they're going to meet them where they're at. They're going to be, their job is to help this organization get over the hump and get compliant. But that's not how MSPs really work. An MSP has a process about how they work with their clients. They've got certain technologies and systems. They have their
services
team
that they provide. Yeah.
Specific, we support this AV and this is how we do stuff. They already have like their processes of how they're going to do stuff. And they can't just come in, do a gap assessment and meet the client with whatever AV, whatever cloud solution they're using. No, the MSP has to kind of say, this is how we're going to do it. So kind of coming in with that gap assessment and then doing the POAM and walking them through, that's pretty much goes out the window when you start thinking about how to scale as an MSP. So the way a mature MSP, in my opinion, would handle it is like, this is the process of how we're going to handle things for you. We either meet you, if you're like, we're looking for someone who's going to help us with Google, you're like, that's not us. Thank you. But if it's like, oh, we need somebody to help us in the Microsoft side. We have these 50 Mac devices. I'm like, that's not us. We can't help you.
We can't do that
with Mac. Yeah. We've got all these Linux components. You're going to be able to fully manage and support all those. Like, no, like, you've got to have your avatar of how you're going to do your support for your clients and how you're going to be able to manage them. And
or your technicians would hate you as an MSP
they're not going to be able to, because in a traditional MSP engagement, it's like, I can help support you. You know, if I'm not as knowledgeable about a topic, that's fine. CMMC isn't that way. It's either met or not met. So either you're doing the vulnerability or you're not. You're either applying the patches correctly, you're either doing the access management, you're either doing SIM monitoring for those devices and controlling that, the log management piece. All of that has to happen, whether you know how to do it or not. Like, that's going to get assessed in your assessment. So that's why you've got to really limit your scope to exactly what you can do in your bones and have that system designed. So that's where that transparency piece needs to come in. As an MSP, you have to be very transparent with the contractor that you're working with. What does that mean to you?
Yes.
And I think there's some key points that have to really be conveyed. What is your system going to look like when you're supporting the client after it's done? And what are you going to do to help them get to that journey of readiness?
And during the assessment, though.
During the assessment,
all 3 stages: before, during, after.
Right. You've got to have to have a plan as an MSP, as you're working with your clients, if you're going to help get them there, how you're going to operationalize that process for them to be compliant. Because if you go to support a 20-person company and they've never done change control in their life, how do you as an MSP get them from not having change control to having change control, and it work with how you as an MSP help support them? That's like a thing. You absolutely have to have that. Mm-hmm. So you've got to have a system designed for you to support them and operationalize that in their environment. And then, like you're saying, Kaleigh, be able to also, during your assessment, are you going to talk for them? Or are you not going to talk for them? Are you just going to give them some documentation, answer some questions? But like, what does that assessment process look for how you're going to support the client?
This is so, so important, because I have talked to multiple contractors that are on their 2nd journey of CMMC, their 3rd journey of CMMC. Multiple people have had to restart their journey of CMMC because they got close to the assessment and discovered that the external service provider they had was not going to help them with this. Like, they were not aware of how far the ESP was going to get them. And that is so important to define. When you're an external service provider, like, be transparent on where your services start and where they end. It's why we have a customer responsibility matrix as well, is so that we can define those things. We'll go even further than that, define the whole engagement as an ESP, just like we're doing that in the customer responsibility matrix with your system security plan. Define the whole thing so that they know what's going on. And also, like, don't piss people off, because I'm sure that's not going to be good for your business too. You know, there's risk involved with that as well. And if the transparency piece too, if you're a prime contractor that's talking to multiple subs, is be transparent on what you're expecting of them and when.
Oh, so true. Because
one
of the things that really punched me in the face, that just being very transparent here, oh my gosh, transparent, is
wow. Thank you for being transparent while I have on the
like
screen.
we've got, I mean, just personal opinion, I think we've got pretty good documentation. I mean, I like how we have it. I mean, it's very detailed. It's got a lot of, sometimes to a flaw, it's got detail in it. But what I found, one of the biggest challenges, you drop this access control policy, your administrative procedures, all this stuff, you drop it on the table and the client looks at that and goes, what's that? And you're like, well, that's your compliance. You know, like, that's cool. I don't even know what to do with that. Like, what does any of this actually mean? Like, can you give me the TLDR version of this that kind of breaks down about what I'm supposed to do? Because I have no idea. All I see is words, dude. So, I mean, like, just because you have perfect documentation, a good build plan for their container, doesn't mean that you can get them to compliance. Like, they don't understand this. Mm-hmm. So not only that, but you've got to think about how you're going to walk them through what you've got,
right,
and do it in a way that's going to be bite-sizable for them.
Right.
So they can start implementing it. And you've got to do it, guess what, in a time frame, because you've got to schedule your audit. Because if, as an MSP, if you're like, okay, once we got you level 2 ready, then we'll schedule your audit. Well, then that might mean that you may not be able to schedule their audit for 8 months after you finally got them ready. Mm-hmm. And it might take you 7 to get them ready. So now that's well over a year before they could get audited, because you didn't want to schedule the audit. So what does that mean? That means you're probably going to have to schedule your audit at some point as you're doing your rollout, which means you're putting a deadline on you and you're putting a deadline on the client.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that means you got to have stuff scheduled, that deadlines for different pieces that you're going to do. It's different. It's very, very different. It's nothing. It's not anything like an MSP like you've ever done before.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we've spoken mostly about this subject is because, in our opinion, this is like the biggest
Yes.
thing. This is the most important thing. Now we're going to talk about the other things that are also very important. But first and foremost, transparency. Huge thing. Second, which we kind of talked about this already, so I'm going to skip to the next one because we talked about what we did a little bit more. But if you have specific questions about us too, you can put them in the Q&A section as well. We'd be happy to answer. But the thing that I want to talk about next is leadership buy-in. Leadership buy-in. This is so critical. If you're in, Ty is clapping to this. If you are an ESP and you are talking with your, contractor that you work with, and they don't have leadership buy-in, this is going to be so difficult for you. It is going to be like, we're using an example. We always talking about climbing Mount CMMC, right? It is like you're climbing up the mountain, but you literally have to drag them throughout the whole way. It is going to be painful. It's you even have, it is sometimes like that, even with leadership buy-in. So imagine without leadership buy-in, how painful it is.
It is the hardest part of the process, is pulling the client along. You're like, okay, here's the administrative procedures of how you onboard a person. Okay, this is based on how we do it, but we understand there might be some things different for how you do it. So we need you to review this, give it to us in a week and a half after you look through any questions. And then in the next week, we're going to go ahead and implement it. Right? And they're like, yeah. Because when they talk to you in the sales process, the first thing they're going to ask, Kaleigh, is like, how fast can you get this done? You're like, how fast are you going to do it with us? And they're like,
how fast are you going to respond to your things?
Wait a minute, me? I'm like, yeah, you.
Right.
Yeah, we're absolutely talking about you, because we can't do all of this ourselves. We absolutely need you and your administrative team. And that's the reason why so many times Kaleigh's done such a great job in the sales process, that if she senses that the client that's possibly courting us, potential client, if they don't have good enough leadership buy-in, we'll just pass. We won't engage with them.
Yeah.
Because the process is so hard to move clients through this. If you know that in your bones, they're not really in it to win it, it will destroy you.
Yeah, you'll also waste a lot of your team's time.
Oh,
like our internal team, not to be rude, we want to help as many people as we can, but we can't help people that don't want to be helped. Yeah. we cannot. You have to want it, and you have to be able to go for it. I do think it's also important to note here, Bobby, that because of this, as an ESP, we do not claim that we can handle 320 of this assessment objectives of 320. That is impossible. You cannot. There is very much administrative controls and assessment objectives that are required, and things that people need to do in their roles in the company. It is not just a checkbox. It is not just something that you can sign a paper, give it to an ESP, and they can do it for you. It is literally culturally changing the way that you operate. So this is why it is so critical to know this.
Let's walk through a quick scenario that I think will help solidify this for people. The client's just used to calling you, putting in a ticket, and say, hey, just add a user. We started them yesterday. They're here looking at me. Can't you add them? With CMMC, the answer is going to be, no, I can't. Because your HR person's supposed to do a review, a background check of that person, and they have to do additional training, right, before they're given access, because that's part of the CMMC process, awareness training, and we have to do that before we give them access to the CUI environment.
Yeah.
And then we also have to make sure that account is authorized to have access. And we've got to make sure that the device that they're going to be accessing it from is additionally authorized to have access to it. So all of these layers go to get applied. Maybe that is part of your change requirement process as well. So maybe there has to be a change requirement. Maybe the way that you've written your policies, adding a user is just a standard process and doesn't require a change process. Not everything has to be a change. So, but some things do. So where do you draw that line, right? So the client has to understand that and how they kick that over to you to receive as an MSP, filling out some type of form, some type of authorization process that comes to you. You validate that they followed the processes, and then you implement it. And you've got to document that because the auditors are going to ask about that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're going to ask about their side, and they're going to ask about your side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all going to be part of the shared responsibility matrix that you're going to present to them
Mm-hmm.
in the audit that they will look at as well. So all of that comes together in this beautiful, harmonious process we call audit.
So beautiful. Yes. Oh, go ahead, Bobby.
In some ways that you can tell that the leadership's not bought in is like Kaleigh has in there, intern cannot implement. Like if it's given to an intern and that intern's reaching out to you for a quote, just walk away. You know, if it is, hey, leadership is really begrudging. They just really hate the fact we're doing this, but we're just going to try to get over the hump. Walk away. Don't. Like if they're fighting you already and they hate life and this whole process and they're not really in it and the facility person doesn't want to do this and no, just you're doomed because it takes so much buy-in from all parties involved. Mm-hmm. And as well as if you're an MSP and you're thinking about trying to support the clients and you're like, I think our company can do this, but my leadership's fighting me, you're in trouble.
So true. Great point.
Because like this whole process rocks an MSP to its core about how they operate. And if the leadership of that managed service provider doesn't fully buy into it, they are doomed. They have no chance of getting this pulled off correctly because it's just crazy difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I feel like you kind of mentioned, I'm going to talk about this in a second. I want to talk about this one first, that you were kind of mentioning there of how it rocks the world of MSPs. There's two different sides of this that I do want to mention about tools when it comes to CMMC. One thing I just want to share, this is real world experience that I have heard about, and I just want to start with this to make sure people understand that I have talked to multiple people who have failed assessments because of the tools. Yeah. They did not realize that a tool that they had was in scope, or they didn't realize the requirements for the tool that they had in scope, and it was not fulfilling those. This is very, very important as an external service provider or specifically an MSP, because what do we love with tools? We love automation. We love that it makes our life easier, and it's great. Like we love those things as MSPs, and we use a lot of tools, but you have to be really, really careful when bringing them, one, into your system as a CMMC provider, and two, in your client's system that is going to be handling CUI. So Bobby, do you want to speak specifically to this as well?
Yeah. So the determining factor first, I got this question the other day. Someone asked me, they were like, so let's say that I'm using a tool or a system that is incorrectly handling CUI. In other words, it's a cloud tool or something that is receiving CUI and it's not in a FedRAMP environment. What control in 800.171 alpha do I fail? And the answer is none. You don't fail any of those. If you do a search for FedRAMP requirements in all 320 assessment objectives, you're not going to see anything in there that talks about that. So then why is it such a big deal that you could potentially fail your audit if you use a tool that is got complete access or is storing controlling classified information and it's not FedRAMPed? Where's this coming from? It comes from the DFARS requirement. And if you look at 252.204.70.12 requirement, in there it talks about if contractors intend to use an external cloud service provider to store, process, or transmit cover defense information, yada, yada, yada. There's a whole thing in there. I could go ahead and read it all. But basically, in that DFARS requirement, it says if it's going to handle CUI, it has to be a FedRAMPed environment in order for it to appropriately receive that data. Okay, so And then the 32 CFR really defined that better about where they kind of drew those lines. We could really get into some dirty laundry about talking about all that, some history of it. Definitely not going to do that right now. But suffice it to say that really the line that you want to think of is it going to store, transmit, or have access to CUI? So that's where like an RMM tool gets really sketchy.
Right.
So if you put an RMM tool that can do file transfers, that can give you remote access to the system, that can give the organization that, like the company that runs the RMM tool, do they have access to that information? Is it CUI? Is that in the boundary of the CUI tenant? That's where you have to really start thinking about the tools that you're using and what access they have to that and what capabilities they have. And if you're putting a tool in a CUI environment, those are the things you need to start thinking about where those boundaries and lines are. And so it is a very complicated discussion that as a MSP, you need to really understand before you step into that space and start supporting clients, is you need to understand where those lines are drawn. And we can't cover all that in one slide. We have actually podcast episodes. I don't know if Malia can find them quickly and post them in here, but we have some podcast episodes and some guests that actually even came and talked more specifically about that topic.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's great.
But you've got to really think about when you come into this, not all your tools are going to come with you as a managed service provider. And if you are hiring an MSP, you need to sit down. Pro tip here, if you're working with MSP and you're trying to go through it, have them list each tool that they're going to be using in your environment. What is it doing? What does it have access to? Is it FedRAMPed? What type of access does it, does it need to have that? And where's this all coming from? For us, we pretty much standardized in the Microsoft tool set because we knew if we built up the client's container and it was in a GCCI tenant and we use as much of their, their tool set in there, then we're going to inherit from their FedRAMP. And we dodge that challenge altogether. So, and then anything that we use to support the client with is either out of their tenant or out of our tenant that got level 2 assessed in a GCCI tenant as well. And so, and then if there's any additional tools or things that we might use, we've kind of drawn the bar. It has to be FedRAMP just because we want to not have to fight that fight.
We have a question that says, do you still need FedRAMP if you're providing a single tenant dedicated hosting for CUI, e.g. Dedicated physical server for a defined customer or a dedicated virtual private cloud, which stores CUI, but where the storage is not shared with other clients?
If you're hosting and standing it up, tenants for clients, and you're hosting their CUI, it is something that you need to talk with someone who really thoroughly understands where those lines are and make sure you know that you're safe.
If you are a CSP, you need to know if you're a CSP.
It's not as simple like if you host something that immediately you're a CSP. It's not, it's not like losing your car keys or something. It's not that simple. But there are some things that you could step into and fall into if you're not careful as you're doing those types of things. And you need to understand it. You need to talk with a C3PO. When we went to step in this space, we contacted a C3PO. Could you talk with an RP? Absolutely, you could. But a C3PO does assessments. Their job is literally to define what you are and aren't allowed to do and pass you. Or you can have a consultant that may or may not have ever gone through an audit ever. That's the reason why we targeted a very well reputable C3PO, and they kind of gave us good consulting about here's some landmine areas. You can walk there if you want, just know where they all are. And we kind of helped to map that out. But definitely have a good consultant that you work with to understand that. Don't just freehand it.
Yep. And I think that's really important to note too, is like many people hear that like C3PAOs, you can't do, you can't do consulting if you talk with them. So they're like, oh, so I can't talk with them. It's like, no, like you could talk to a C3PAO and have them do your consulting and then choose a different C3PAO for your assessment itself. That's what we would recommend. I mean, they give great advice because they do assessments all the time, just like Bobby said. Okay. Let's see here. So let's talk about a CMMC timeline. So I just wanted This is not something that I pulled from 32 CFR. Well, I guess some of it is. An example would be the phased rollout that they talk about in 32 CFR. So the final rule shares that when 48 CFR drops, which we're going to assume based on what Katie Arrington has preached and said, and some of what we've heard from the DoD, that it's probably going to drop this fall. When it drops is when the phased rollout begins. It's when self-assessments for CMMC level 1 and CMMC level 2 will start to come into play, is what they say, right? And then the year after that, the year following that, is when you're going to start seeing certifications drop.
And everybody gets so wrapped around the axle. Oh, so it's self-assessment, so we have time. Okay.
You're still compliant.
You're still required to be compliant. You absolutely could still win the contract and be lying to the DOJ and be liable for False Claims Act. So just because they're not asking you to get a test doesn't mean you're not supposed to have it by that point. It just means that you can tell yourself and lie to yourself that you're compliant, even though you probably know that I'm probably not, but they're not going to find out, and I can still win the business and buy myself time. The client is accepting that responsibility. You as an MSP, if you're involved in that, need to understand where those lines are. You need to have a nice attorney who understands about where they end and you begin.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk with you about what that is here. Eventually I think we're going to have like Eric Krugian, I think is how you say his last name. He's a really good CMMC based attorney. I think eventually we'll have him on a webinar here and talk about it.
Yes, I'd love to have him.
Yes, or at least on our podcast. Mm-hmm. But those are great things that you want to have an attorney that does those types of things in your hip pocket to have those conversations. They're not cheap, pretty expensive, but knowing where those lines are can save you a lot of potential litigation.
and something that I did put here is just based upon the contractors that I've been talking to and what I've been hearing, is when CMMC level 2 certifications may start to really hit your contracts, if not even before this point. Notice that the primes and subs are a little bit different, and the reason that I said that is because subcontractors have been coming to me and just sharing that they need to have a POAM ready. They have to be, already scheduled with their assessor for CMMC level 2. They have these requirements that are being put on them by primes. Makes sense. Primes are responsible for their subs getting ready, right? So they're kind of putting some of these restrictions already on subcontractors because they want to get them ready so they know that they are ready by the time these contracts are hitting. So before 48 CFR, you're already, as a subcontractor, might be getting hit with requirements to have CMMC level 2 certifications from not necessarily even your contracts, but from the primes requiring it from you to do services with them or to work on a bid with them. So please, please, please be aware if your contractor that you're working with is a subcontractor that might be needing these requirements even sooner than what CMMC requirements for the phased rollout are saying. It's also important to note that in the phased rollout, it says that they're able to just totally trump this whole timeline and put certifications, CMMC level 2 certifications in contracts if they see fit. So just know that they're still going to do what they want to do. So what does that mean? Well, in my opinion, it means the more time you wait, waiting for 48 CFR to drop, the more time you're wasting. Not necessarily, you're doing a good business decision waiting for 48 CFR because who knows when it's going to hit you or whatnot. That is really not the case. And I also think it is important to note, if your contractor that you're working with is waiting for 48 CFR to drop because they think they have then a whole year to prep for their CMMC level 2 certification so that they're certified in time, they might need to know that people fail them, right? So what happens if you plan the whole year and you get to it and you do it and you fail?
So let's talk real life here. Okay, so we got our level 2 in January. We went through and got a perfect 110 or a mock assessment in August of last year.
Mm-hmm.
Even right now, as we're moving us and our clients through, we are hitting all kinds of challenges we hadn't anticipated as working with clients, running into situations we haven't seen before, as we're guiding and working with these clients. And it is crazy hard to go through it. And we have gone through our level 2 assessment. We have gone through the CCA, CCP courses. I'm waiting for my tier 3 to come back so then I can get my CCA. Like we've gone through all this experience and working, and you still don't get it all. Like it doesn't manifest in your head and come to you like manna from heaven. Like you've got to really be involved in the just wrestling on the mat and going through this. And if you're an MSP and you haven't even gotten your level 2 yet, and you're trying to play the field, I just want to let you know that getting your level 2 is barely the starting blocks for the race that you're about to run with your clients that you're going to be using to support them.
Right.
So, and it took us almost 9 months to a year to do it, and we knew exactly how to do it at that last run, right? It's like we had restarted through learning several times, and this last run we took us about 8 months to a year, and that was the final run that we went through before we got our level 2. So like the point I'm trying to make is if you know exactly how to do it, it's going to take you at least 8 months to do it. That's assuming that you perfectly know how to do it, and you're probably not. So as an MSP, you've got this whole learning process you're going to have to figure out, and then you're going to have to do it the right way at least once, right? Mm-hmm. And then learn the lessons as you're working through with the client. So there's a tremendous amount of head space that you're going to have to spend to understand this, and a lot of lead time to work with your clients. And what's going to happen is 48 CFR is going to drop, and you're going to get flooded by clients. They're going to turn to you and say, how fast can I get this done? And you haven't even gone through your level 2 and necessarily defined how you're going to do all that. They're screwed, and so are you.
Yeah.
So like if you don't believe me,
yeah,
go for it.
I mean, I have a major fear. I have a major fear of when 48 CFR drops for us personally, and we've been preparing for like years, and I still have fear. So I can't imagine on that side just like the amount of people that are going to. I explained it in a post that I did. It's like it feels like they're groundhogs and they're popping up like trying to see if spring is here yet, and they duck back in because it's not. But it's like winter ended December 16th of last year when 32 CFR dropped. Like, honestly, it was before that, but especially December 16th of last year when that dropped. And assessments could happen, and you literally could get certified. Yeah, it's going to be, in my opinion, a madhouse once 48 CFR drops. The reason that I know that, too, I like to explain also why I think that too, and not just like throw crap to the fan, right? The reason that I feel confident about that is because all of the contractors that I talk to on a regular basis literally say, okay, we're going to wait and make this decision. Okay, I was like, what are you waiting for? And they're waiting for this. I'm like, why are you waiting for what reason are you waiting for that? Like, what is happening here that makes you think that waiting for this is a good idea? And many, many, many are that I'm talking to. It's wild, but it's happening. Okay, the last thing that I do want to mention, which is so critical, and we are going to talk, I'm going to plug a little bit. We're going to talk about these in detail in webinars to come. Our upcoming webinar is going to talk about this, which we're going to link at the end of this, or Malia, if you want to link it now, you even can. We are going to talk very deep about documentation. This is not the one for that, but I do want to emphasize what you need to prepare as an external service provider, especially, and if you're a contractor, you need to prepare your system security plan. And if you have an external service provider, a customer responsibility matrix that defines who is doing what. Thank you, Malia. There's a system security plan webinar that's coming up.
That's going to be a good one. I remember.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I am so
did this
excited
presentation similar in, was it CMMC Midwest? Is that what it was? The SSP one?
Yeah, it was Midwest. That's right. Yeah, it was Midwest. Yeah, it went really well, and we got into detail. Like, I'm not just saying like in general. I'm talking about what the parts look like, how detailed you can get in your assessment objectives, what an assessor wants to see. You want to start and end an assessment with the assessors having confidence in you. You want to keep that confidence up. So, like, what do you have in your system security plan that gives your assessors that confidence, going into it, that you haven't already lost them somewhere along the way, right? And so this upcoming one is going to be really great with diving into specifically a system security plan. And we'll go down the line with these things as well. But if you are an external service provider, a customer responsibility matrix is critical. It is what you need to bring to an assessment, a CMMC level 2 assessment for your contractor that you're working with. You also have to show the agreement between you and the contractor, and they do want to see your SLAs. They want to see all those things talking to as well what the 32 CFR describes. It can't just be your regular MSP agreement. It has to speak to CMMC and the requirements of that, okay? So, spoiler alert, if you're not already talking with an attorney or somebody that can help you create a new agreement for CMMC, you really should be talking with one. We had to do that, right, Bobby? You had to do that for a while. It's no joke. You can't just
so just very quickly, there's two main phases in your audit that is going to potentially impact you here. Your phase one, phase one, they're going to look at all of this stuff. They're going to want to see your SSP. They're not going to thoroughly audit it. They just want to see that you have the right content. But in phase one of the things they want to see, like Kaleigh's talking about, is the relationship between the MSP and the organization being assessed, because they want to get an idea of who's going to talk when and who's responsible for what.
Right.
But in the agreement, in the CAP, the CMMC assessment process document that the Cyber AB released, it talks about that there's expectations in the agreement to call to the MSP to hold them accountable for that process. So if you have just a traditional MSP agreement that you say, I do IT services and I do some other things, I mean, you're really relying on the auditor to kind of go, I guess this appropriately speaks to them being responsible for handling the CMMC requirements. If it doesn't talk to the matrix, if your agreement doesn't really talk to any of that, you're really kind of following, you're kind of throwing yourself at the mercy of the auditor to just kind of say, well, I think this agreement's enough. It's agreement, the client signed it, I think that's fine, and they just move on. It probably would be. But
I think Brian's in here, and Brian would say, I'm not going to allow you to do that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of sucky to kind of try to get ready, and because your agreement isn't written with enough detail to kind of talk about how you're going to do it, and you get the right auditor that's like, I got a problem with that. You might get what's called false start and never get out of phase one with your client, because your agreement between them doesn't hold you as an MSP appropriately enough responsible for what you're undertaking with that client. Yeah. I'm not an attorney, so I can't really draw the lines, and not a lot of the assessors are. So, I mean, that's where it just depends on what auditor you're going to get. And for us, we just didn't feel comfortable falling into that kind of category, so we leaned in a lot more heavily. So we had some specific agreement verbiage around those requirements and how we accept those. We actually spent quite a bit of time on that, because we knew this was going to be such a big part of our business. We wanted to make sure that we appropriately covered that.
Right, exactly. And speaking of, the assessment, we talked about like the phase one and the documentation that you're bringing to the table. But another thing that we also mentioned about the transparency piece later on is many people do not realize the external service provider and how they are expectant to speak to the controls and assessment objectives that they provide for the organization seeking assessment. And there is also, I mean, testing, right? The testing part of an assessment of showing how you do something in, let's say, Azure, let's say Intra, right? You use that example a lot too. How in the world is the, project manager of that organization seeking assessment going to know how to do those things like the ESP is? I'm still baffled that people are getting away with external service providers not being a part of an assessment, but it does literally say that, even in the CAP, that assessors should expect the external service provider to be present in this. But
yeah, to kind of, not everybody may be up to speed on kind of what Kaleigh's talking about, but there's sort of this paper versus plastic approach when you're going through the grocery line of CMMC assessments, that they're like, I, as an MSP, I don't want to be there. I want to provide all the information and get the technical design set up. Especially if they got level 2 themselves, because I went through and got level 2 audited. You don't need to talk to me. Here's the stuff that's relevant to the client. Call me never. I mean, that's kind of some people's MSP's attitude towards it.
Yeah.
We never really looked at it that way, because we knew that inheritance wasn't probably a reality right now, the way that the CMMC assessment process is written, fully inheritable like that. So the MSP, in fact, they call them out and say, you have to be there. We've talked to numerous potential clients over the last month, even, that they're talking with MSPs that are like, we're going to provide you information and we're not really going to be relevant or in your audit because it's so good. It's going to cover it on its own and they can just read it. And I'm like, the CAP doesn't really allow you to do that. Like, you're going to have to be there to some extent. So as an MSP, you're going to have to be there at least some part of the assessment, shoulder to shoulder. And to me, it's like you're on the 5-yard line at the audit. And don't get me wrong, getting ready for an audit is probably, I equate it to making sandcastles buck naked on an ant bed. I mean,
I have never heard you say that.
It is painful and difficult, and it is not something I look forward to. But I mean, if you care about your client, it's like what you signed up for. Like, as an MSP, if you're going to support your client, you got to be there on the 5-yard line to help them put it in the end zone. Come on.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you did everything right up to that point. If they don't get across the 5-yard line into the end zone, they're not going to score. They don't pass. They fail. Doesn't matter how awesome you were, all the other 95 yards.
Yeah.
You failed them on the 5-yard line.
Yeah, that's so true.
Sorry. That's when it really, 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 really counts. And going through and preparing the client, and it's almost like getting them ready for a deposition for an attorney. Like, they've got to. Some clients freak out because they're like, I got to talk. What am I going to say? I could say the wrong thing. Are you going to talk? When am I going to talk? You've got to have it all mapped out. Who's going to say what, who's going to say when. And you've got to put that forward to the auditor, because don't let them pick it. You want to say, here's how we're going to do the assessment. Here's who's going to talk. Now, if they push back, then you can kind of negotiate it, but don't just dive into their arms and say, well, just hopefully they'll pick the things we want. No, come up with a plan about how you're going to do that. And present that to the assessment, especially when you're in the negotiation process with the C3PO. You can talk about how that's when you can really start discussing and negotiating, because that's when the money's thinking about being done. You can tell the C3PO, I want to have this, 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 and this. And if they disagree, then, you maybe pick another C3PO, but at least you're making those choices right then.
Yeah, so true. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Guys, I want to emphasize again, if you'd like to sign up to learn more about specifics of the system security plan as well, please go ahead and sign up. Also, we're here for questions. We have a few more minutes until the end of this, so put any questions that you might have in the Q&A section for us to answer. Thank you guys again, and have a great rest of your Monday. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.